Since ancient times, few biblical figures have carried such deep mystery as Moses. As a helpless baby, sentenced to death by royal decree, he was miraculously saved. As a prince, he lived in the luxury of Egyptian palaces. As a fugitive, he experienced exile in the desert. And as a liberator, he stood against the most powerful empire of his time. But who was Moses, really? What made him such a unique leader in the biblical narrative? Born into oppression, his mother hid him for 3 months until, with no other option, she placed him in a basket and set him adrift on the banks of the Nile. But what seemed like a tragic end was actually the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Pharaoh's daughter found him and raised him as an Egyptian, giving him access to the best education and influence. For 40 years, Moses lived as a prince, until the truth of his heritage changed everything. After witnessing a Hebrew being beaten, he killed an Egyptian and fled to the desert. There, he became a shepherd and encountered God in the fire of a burning bush. The one who ran away was now called to set an entire nation free. After a life marked by miracles and trials, Moses reached the final chapter of his journey. He had led the people to the very edge of the Promised Land, but was not allowed to enter. From the top of Mount Nebo, with the cutting wind swirling around him, he gazed upon the land God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. His eyes scanned the vast territory of Canaan, the golden fields of Ephraim and Manasseh, the glimmer of the Mediterranean Sea in the distance. The promise stood before him, but he would never walk upon it. "This is the land I swore to give to your ancestors," said the Lord. "I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross into it." And so, there on that silent height, Moses passed from this world. Jewish tradition describes his death as the kiss of God, a peaceful, painless moment of transition. But the most mysterious part came after. His body vanished. There was no funeral, no monument, no known grave. God himself buried Moses in a hidden place. But why? The answer may lie in Israel's tendency toward idolatry. If they had found his tomb, Moses could have become an object of worship, drawing people away from true devotion. But the mystery becomes even more intriguing when we discover that the story of Moses' body was far from over. In one of the most enigmatic passages in the entire Bible, Jude 1 verse 9 reveals a spiritual conflict known by few, a direct confrontation between the Archangel Michael and Satan over the body of Moses. It's a moment not detailed in the Old Testament, yet it holds profound implications for the unseen reality around us. The text is clear. Michael, though one of the most powerful angels, did not dare bring an accusation against the devil. Instead, he said, "The Lord rebuke you," a response that reveals not only reverence for God's authority, but also the immense spiritual weight of that moment. But why did Satan want Moses' body? According to ancient Jewish traditions, such as the Assumption of Moses and rabbinic writings, this dispute was not merely symbolic. It carried real spiritual value. Moses' body wasn't just matter. It was a living symbol of God's power, the Exodus, the miracles, the law, and divine favor. Satan knew that, in the wrong hands, the remains of Israel's greatest prophet could become a tool of idolatry. The people had once worshipped a golden calf. Why wouldn't they venerate a miraculous tomb? Beyond that, to defile the body of servant so close to God would be a gesture of contempt toward the Creator. Or worse, a means of staging false miracles, deceiving the people with apparitions, signs, or even fake messages allegedly from Moses himself. Some scholars suggest that Satan may have sought to prevent a possible prophetic return of Moses, as one of the 2 witnesses described in Revelation 11. And finally, there's something even deeper. By attempting to seize Moses' body, the enemy wasn't merely after physical remains. He was trying to symbolically break the covenant between God and Israel, to attack the legacy, distort the memory, and ultimately undermine the faith of an entire nation. But what exactly did Michael do to stop this plan? And why did he use such a specific phrase to confront the devil? And more importantly, what was the outcome of this dispute over the body of Moses? What happened after Michael intervened? The answer leads us to one of the most surprising connections in the entire Bible. In the most decisive moments of biblical history, one name echoes with power in the midst of spiritual battles: Michael, the supreme commander of heaven's army, the great defender of Israel, God's warrior who rises when the forces of darkness try to cross forbidden lines. In Jude 1 verse 9, we see Michael confronting Satan in a mysterious dispute over the body of Moses. But unlike what many might expect, he doesn't engage in direct combat. He doesn't raise his sword. He doesn't shout threats. He simply declares, "The Lord rebuke you." That phrase is far more than just a religious saying. It holds a foundational principle of spiritual warfare. Authority belongs to God. Michael, though a mighty archangel, does not act on his own. He does not rely on his own strength, but appeals directly to the Lord, showing that all judgment and power come from him alone. This pattern had already been revealed earlier in Zechariah 3 verse 2, where God himself rebukes Satan as he tries to accuse the high priest Joshua, a scene that echoes the battle in heaven described in Revelation 12, where Michael leads the angels of God against the great dragon, Satan. In Daniel 10, Michael appears once more, this time fighting demonic forces trying to block the answer to Daniel's prayer. Here we learn that spiritual warfare isn't limited to a single event. It is a constant battle fought in unseen realms. If Michael, the commander of the heavenly armies, depends on God's authority, what does that teach us about how we should face our own spiritual battles? On top of a mountain bathed in heavenly light, something extraordinary takes place. 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, stand in awe, witnessing a vision that defies human comprehension. Before their eyes, Jesus begins to shine with a radiant light, and his clothes become dazzling white like snow. But he is not alone. Standing beside him are Moses and Elijah. Moses, the lawgiver; Elijah, the prophet; and at the center, Jesus, the fulfillment of the divine promise. This moment, recorded in Matthew 17, Mark 9, and Luke 9, was not merely a supernatural event. It carried deep and powerful meaning. Moses represented the law, the foundation of God's covenant with Israel. Elijah symbolized the prophets, those who called the people back to faithfulness. And Jesus, he was the perfect fulfillment of both. The law and the prophets pointed directly to him. Moses' presence there confirms something incredible. His story did not end with his mysterious death. He reappears glorified, speaking with Christ about the redemption that was about to be fulfilled in Jerusalem. Peter, overwhelmed by the vision, wants to build shelters for the 3. But before he can act, a cloud covers them, and a voice thunders from heaven. "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." It wasn't about Moses. It wasn't about Elijah. It was about Jesus, the very fulfillment of the entire redemptive story. Since the beginning, an invisible war has been waged, not only over bodies, but over the legacies of God's servants. The enemy cannot undo what God has done, but he tries to distort it, corrupt it, and lead people astray. It was that way with Moses, and it has been that way with so many others. Daniel faced this battle when he was taken captive to Babylon. The Babylonians tried to rewrite his identity, give him a new name, a new culture, a new faith. But Daniel remained unshakable. Joshua, while leading Israel into the Promised Land, saw the people vacillate between obedience to God and the lure of idols from surrounding nations. The battle wasn't just against armies, it was against the influence of deception. And in Revelation, we see this battle reach its peak. The enemy, called the accuser of the brethren, continues his war, trying to twist and destroy everything God has established. Today, that war is still raging. The fight isn't just for knowledge, it's for endurance in the truth. The modern world is full of distorted teachings, false doctrines, and tempting promises that pull people away from the essence of the gospel. That's why spiritual vigilance is essential, not just to know right from wrong, but to recognize the subtle lies that can slowly draw us away from God's true purpose. But what does the story of Moses teach us about all this? And how can we shield our faith against such attacks? The answer lies in God's ultimate purpose for those who remain faithful to the end. The story of Moses doesn't end with his death, nor with his mysterious burial, not even with the dispute over his body. This story is a powerful reminder that spiritual warfare is real, and it happens beyond what our eyes can see. From the very beginning, we've seen Satan trying to distort legacies, erase truth, and lead God's people astray. But we've learned something even more important. The final word belongs to the Lord. The Archangel Michael didn't rely on his own strength. He declared, "The Lord rebuke you." And through that, he showed us something crucial. Authority belongs to God. We don't win spiritual battles through our own efforts, but through confidence in the sovereignty of the Lord. And that is the great truth of this story. God takes care of those who remain faithful until the end. Moses didn't enter the promised land in this life, but he appeared glorified beside Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. That means his destiny was never a forgotten tomb, but eternity in the presence of God. That is our hope. Resurrection, redemption, the eternal plan of God. Like Moses, we are called to trust in the Lord's faithfulness, knowing that he protects us, guides us, and leads us in everlasting life. If this message spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to understand this spiritual battle. And to make sure you don't miss more deep and powerful Bible studies like this one, subscribe to the channel right now. May the Lord bless you and keep you. I'll see you in the next video.